One of the things that we wanted to talk a little bit about today was just the fact that Cyber Titan is going on. So who's this guy? Well, these people all have their names in your program, so you can figure out who they are. And
except for me.
oh, yes, Kevin was Kevin Smith from Route 9B as a late changeover from Mike Tessier. So my name's Andrew Colwell, and I'm a high school teacher. I'm about as far out of this league as you could probably imagine, but I'll just give you a very, very quick background from my point of view. I teach physics, mostly, mathematics, and I grew up, I know that Jamie was up here and he talked about the Commodore 64, and we had the PET by one of the politicians. I go back to the VIC-20, and I just grew up with computers, and I've just got a natural inclination to learn about them and use them, and now they tend to work for me rather well. So I got bumped into the head of technology at my local school at St. John. So 2 years ago, I was gently nudged to become one of the first schools in New Brunswick to start up a Cyber Titan team. So before that, I'd never heard of Cyber Titan, didn't have a clue what it was. But it sounded kind of cool, and it sounded like a competition that some of my kids could actually get involved with, because at my school there are a lot of activities that are going on. We don't have enough coaches for all the activities that are going on, so we're always trying to scrounge up somebody just to help out. But we do have a segment of kids that just don't participate in any of those types of things. It's not what they really want to do, but they are curious about computers and they wanted to participate a little bit. And I knew that, so I said, sure, I'll put together a team. I ended up getting 2 teams that year, and that year they won first and second in the silver tier, which is the bottom tier. But they were quite proud of themselves, and I was extremely proud of it because I didn't have a clue what was going on. They all learned on their own. And today, is the first year that Cyber Titan will be held in Canada, and it's being held tomorrow over at the Crown Plaza. So while you're enjoying the rest of the conference tomorrow, they will be working hard for about 6 hours trying to secure computers, and I believe there's a red team that's going to be working against them. So it's great. There's a team from Fredericton, Nashwauk Sis. I keep going like this. All they are is they're in middle school, but they're so much shorter than the grade 12s. But they're down here, sort of. But it's cool to see their interest and the fact that they really want to get involved with this. So out of that, I've got students now that I know at least 4 are getting into cybersecurity somehow in terms of going on. So that's a little bit of my history. And what we're going to do is just take a little look at how can education work and what sorts of programs are available for students to get involved. So we'll probably have a little bit of time at the end just to have some questions. So if you think of something, just make a note of it, and maybe we can answer some of those questions at the end. But just before we do, since Kevin doesn't have his bio, I'll just... Keith.
That's okay.
It's a bad start.
That's okay.
Maybe I'll just ask you to give a very, very brief introduction, maybe
Sure.
one interesting fact about yourself.
Sure. Okay. I'm a retired United States Army First Sergeant. I spent my career in intelligence, and most of that I was on loan to agencies that are traditionally staffed by civilians, so the Central Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency. And I speak a lot of languages, so there.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that brief introduction, Kevin. So, so the first question is, and I'll put this out to our 3 panelists because we are sort of international. What sorts of activities are there for sort of teenagers to get involved with developing some of these skills? So, Owen, maybe we can get started with you.
Yeah, sure. So Australia is in a slightly behind the ball position, particularly in comparison to Canada and the United States in this space. But we are playing catch up. So at the moment, there hasn't been a coordinated challenge program at the high school level. The ink is actually just drying on the contract with Northrop Grumman. So AustCyber, the organisation I work with, will be the delivery partners of that program in Australia. And what's really exciting about this, having attended the Cyber Patriot finals this year, is first of all the scalability of the actual challenge model. So I believe in Cyber Patriot this year, they had over 5,000 teams compete. Only 28, I think, got to the finals, but 5,000 teams actually competed across the country, and having grown that from 8 in year 1. So I mean that sort of bodes to the scalability of the program. And the other aspect is how it actually might tie into, or will tie into, other levels of challenges. So we've got already quite formulated challenges at the primary school level around computational thinking, and at the high school level, which are more technical and policy related challenges. And we're really looking to build this end-to-end challenge program where we have students who understand that the next year in their educational journey, there is an opportunity for them to compete and test their practical skills in cybersecurity, and that actually has a pathway not just to the next level of challenge, the next level of education, but also into jobs.
Interesting.
So on my end, we have actually 3 initiatives around the information security and cybersecurity side. The first is through middle year into secondary school. We're actually creating. We have a program called Focus on IT, which has 4 streams or 4 pathways that start with business and technical foundational skills, and then students can specialize. And right now, they can specialize in software design and development, in networking, in interactive digital media, as well as business analysis. And we're actually creating a new cybersecurity stream. So across Canada, schools will be able to integrate and take a cybersecurity path right into post-secondary or into school to work. And we're looking at creating a middle years fit, so taking some building blocks and integrating cybersecurity into those building blocks. We also do cyber learning days. We actually have Cyber Titan is tomorrow. On Thursday, we have Cyber Days with IBM with 110 girls coming in. So we're back to back on learning around this side of things. But we do Cyber Learning Days. Again, part of that is an awareness exercise, but we actually do mini competitions. We take an hour and a half where students will be hands-on, securing their system against vulnerabilities. So that ties into Cyber Titan. So Cyber Titan is tomorrow. Cyber Titan is with thanks to our partnership with Cyber Patriot. We're affiliated with Cyber Patriot. So the students compete from October, November until March, in essence, through Cyber Patriot. This year we had 92 Canadian Cyber Titan teams competing amongst the 5,000. And in essence, they compete 6 hours virtually over minimum to maximum of 3 6-hour sessions where they are grilled and drilled in how to secure systems and work their way through. The culmination of that is tomorrow. Top 10 Canadian teams across the country. We had 3 from the west, 3 from the central, and 3 from the east, and a middle school team that qualified to join us in the finals. And they're going to be dueling it out to be the first national Cyber Titan champions. What's exciting is it's based on, essentially we create a VMware situation that's a real life situation that they go through. So even tomorrow, they have no lunch. They have no breaks. When you get attacked, when stuff's happening, they're gonna get a chance to tag out and get some food, but the competition goes on. So 7:30 to 3:30, they're all in until, and then hopefully some of you will be around tomorrow at 4:30 when the winners are announced.
Yeah, that's
great.
fantastic. Yeah, in the United States, we have the Cyber Patriot program, which is actually kind of interesting. It was born out of an effort by an organization called the Civil Air Patrol, it's an old organization. It's been around since during World War II, when we had a shortage of pilots. Ironically, there was a skill shortage in that area. They created an organization to sort of engage with youth and encourage them into those types of skills and careers, and continued in that effort, for many, many years. And around 2009 or 10, I can't remember which exactly, they started, to use that same sort of program to encourage youth to go into careers in cyber. And so the first year, I think they had, I think it was about 150 students nationwide, just individuals from different Civil Air Patrol squadrons around the country who sort of loosely engaged in more or less fellowship in the beginning to try and encourage each other and share skills. And then it just exploded. So the next year, I think it was 2011, we had 1,500. The year after that, there was 55% growth. And I think at last count, there's something on the order of just shy of 50,000 kids nationwide that are involved in the Cyber Patriot program. But in addition to that, which is it no longer strictly restricted to Civil Air Patrol. Now it's kids who have no interest in the military whatsoever. They just simply want to participate in that program. It's gotten a lot more corporate sponsorship, so it's grown. The Civil Air Patrol still participates, but I'm not even sure that they're making up the majority these days. And then along with that, a lot of school districts. I know I live in Colorado Springs. Our own school district has just built, a number of pilot programs around cybersecurity. So, high schools where there's a significant focus on providing coursework and laboratories and software and teachers and relationships with companies like mine, Route 9B, to encourage them to grow in that skill set and move on towards those careers. And then Cyber Titan and Cyber Shield, we continue to have those competitions annually. I think there are at least 2 annually, one East and one West. They're held in conjunction with the AFCEA conference in the United States.
It certainly sounds like Cyber Patriot is one of those areas that youth can get involved, and it seems to be going worldwide now. So
Yeah.
Cyber Shield is in Australia, and Cyber Titan is in Canada, and the original Cyber Patriot being in the United States. Do we know if it's in England as well?
Yeah, Cyber Centurion is the,
Cyber
and also
Centurion.
in Saudi Arabia.
So it's certainly taking off globally, I guess.
So I believe the ambition is to actually have an international competition in a few years' time, where the winners from each of the national competitions will come together and
Duke it out.
do battle.
I'll be watching for that.
Yeah. So if we've got these programs, how can students move from a high school situation into more of a situation like this? I learned a little bit yesterday, Kevin, about your route into things, but if a student was to come out of high school, what are those pathways? We talk about the pathways, or I've heard others talk about pathways, but what are those pathways, and how do we get kids to follow the pathways into the field of cybersecurity?
Well, I mean, if you're asking me, understanding that most of my experience is in intelligence and looking at threats around the world, I think having opportunities like Cyber Patriot, having programs in schools is not critical just as a means of providing a skill set that's desperately needed by an economy or a country. But if you look at other countries around the world, especially in Eastern Europe, where these guys, these kids, these youth who have an interest in this, they tend to self-identify. They actually really are interested in this stuff, and they do it whether you have a program or not. And if there is no program, they're going to do that anyway, and they're likely to find themselves on the wrong end of the law. And there are literally entire villages in certain Eastern European countries where the major economy is made up of cyber criminals. And it's because there are youth there who have either they're self-taught or they've gone out and they've gathered these skills, and they lack other economic opportunity, and they want to monetize this skill set that they have. And so, supply and demand tends to answer a lot of these questions. I'm sure that's not quite the answer you were looking for, but I wanted to make sure and and speak to that, the unrecognized need for youth to have a positive way to follow this skill path is critical to all of us.
Well, I think, I always look at systems when you look at vocational training, and I think there's huge opportunities. So we're starting like grade 5, grade 6 with building cybersecurity skills, and working our way up through there, because I think there's some opportunity to treat it almost like a trade in that sense. But at the same time, if you end up going on to post-secondary, like a lot of the kids, if you really start building deep skills at younger years, you'd be surprised what they can achieve. Our middle school kids are doing amazing in the competitions. And I think just that, younger to work may be an option, when you have that, or mapping. There was an announcement made today around internships and providing an internship. A few of the kids have scored an internship while going to school. I think the pathways, we still have quite a bit to do in post-secondary in terms of cybersecurity, but there are some post-secondary institutions that are really ramping up very quick and creating excellent pathways into post-secondary. But I also want to say, that's a lot of that is really around, we don't treat cybersecurity as an occupation. We treat it as a sector, sorry. We treat it as a skill set. And so when I look at that, it means that every single discipline you take, every single area that you're in, if you map cybersecurity as a skill set in there, the occupations are endless because every single one of them need them. So whether you're in humanities, social sciences, arts, heading into the tech side of things, the STEM side of things, like, the world is your oyster if you have that as a foundation. In terms of adding additional pathways. And I think we too often get fixated or focused on, one sort of stream, whereas I think, to attract a lot of the girls as well, we have to look, and boys that may not be tech, like, I was one of those, I geeked it out. I loved my Commodore 64, and I loved changing the colors on the back of, like, coding the back, so, oh, look, it's blue now, right? Like, so basic, but not every kid is inclined to want to go that route. But I don't think that is necessary. That's one avenue, and I think there's a lot of pathways that they can choose. And I think if we just create that as a foundational skill, they're going to have a lot of opportunities and choices.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the power of challenges, and particularly as they relate to the high school-based challenges, is it stimulates interest in STEM, and STEM more broadly, which then gives us the opportunity, those that work in cybersecurity, then overlay what the careers are and what those career paths are for students to actually enter the field of cybersecurity. Ultimately, when a student graduates from their K-12 program, in my mind, if they've gone through, a Cyber Shield or a Cyber Patriot type challenge throughout high school, if they're then selecting to do a Bachelor of Comms Science, fantastic, win. But if they're equally going into an engineering program or a medical field, whatever that is, it's also a win. I mean, we're still getting that raising of awareness within our youth, and actually building that cyber resilient workforce that we talk so much about.
So it's starting to sound more like cybersecurity is becoming this sort of ubiquitous foundation part to most jobs that are coming up in the future. That's what I'm sort of hearing from many of the panelists. So if I'm going to pose a question that I know you don't have thought about maybe. If you had a child in grade 6, what would be the foundational layer that you'd like to have that child have? What's the skill set in terms of cybersecurity that you'd like to see a student have at about a grade 6 level? So this might stump you for a moment to think about. But
it doesn't stump me. Problem solving, critical thinking, risk management, creativity. The list is endless. I actually have a sheet that's like 30 skill sets. All of them are soft, what would be considered soft skills. Right. So many of them, and then layer on the tech. So I think as we evolve and as, I look at autonomous vehicles, ethics is going to have a huge role to play, right? So as we go forward, those soft skills to me are the foundational ones, ultimately, because those are transferable skills, and complementary to whatever they get into. And so I always start with that and then build your STEM. People laugh at me because I keep saying, if you follow your passions, if you like music, take tech. If you like arts, take tech. All these things, but always make sure you've got, as much of that. And the other piece I would say is business acumen. We work heavily with industry coming into schools in middle school and in high school, because getting that real experience to understand what does math really mean. When you dissect math, elements of math, critical thinking, spatial recognition, what does that actually mean as it relates to the real world? And so that, to me, that understanding of what your, in the future, what your job could be and what value you provide is so critical for kids to understand, because so much changes, which means, as we hit the gig economy and jobs unknown and all this, the more that they can understand the place they have in the world and the value that they can bring to the table, I think is really what we want to arm them with.
Yeah, I actually totally agree. You jumped my answer there, Sandra. The other thing I would add, the only thing I can add, because that was a great answer, is there's sometimes there's a lot of intimidation. Especially at that age, as kids that age approach technology generally, they may be very comfortable operating a smartphone, but if you ask them to engage in what they might think of as a technical effort, they might shy away from that for fear of failure, just for lack of confidence. So just encouraging them to be confident in their interaction with technology on a deeper level, in the same way that a lot of students shy away from math for lack of confidence. I think technology has that same aspect.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would add to that excellent answer is that there's a need to reinforce, or at least encourage students to think about cybersecurity beyond the ones and zeros of the technical side of the careers that are out there, and to think about the more holistic policy type roles and governance type roles, which are increasingly open and highly valued by employers. So students who are going down that tech path, yes, they may end up in one of those highly technical roles, but there are other avenues for students to pursue as well.
So we've talked a little bit about the soft skills, and we've talked a little bit about those pathways to get there. The jobs at the end, what are those jobs at the end, and what will they look like in the future? With new machine learning and AI that's coming along, is that going to affect the cybersecurity sector?
Well, I mean, this is, those of us who are in the cybersecurity sector have to ask that question on a daily basis. One thing that I've become more confident in is that an AI algorithm, an AI system is a beautiful tool, and we can certainly use it with programmable reasoning objects and things of that nature to solve those problems that we're very familiar with. But the interesting thing about cybersecurity is that we're going to see a new problem tomorrow that we have never seen before. And at some point, some smart thinking human being is going to have to arrive at a repeatable solution that can inform the AI system of a programmable reasoning object. And so there'll always be this critical thinking, problem solving that humans are just better at this point.
Now I'm going to say that was a good answer. No, I think that really is ultimately it, right? I think you don't know what you don't know, and technology can only take it so far. Technology is an enabler but the human factor is the most critical piece. So I'll leave it at that because I agree.
So those jobs that students are actually looking for at the end, I mean, that's one of the common themes I hear, at least in Australia, is that lack of a common nomenclature to actually understand what those job roles are. Rodney Peterson from NICE presented this morning on the NICE workforce framework, which maps out 52 common work roles against 7 different speciality areas. I'm yet to find anything that comes even close to matching that in terms of level of clarity that it provides to people looking to enter the industry, or the types of skills that might be needed for someone that's looking to transition into the industry. So really what I see with the NICE framework is an opportunity to foster international collaboration, so that we're, at least amongst our Five Eye partners, are all developing our workforce and framing our workforce and messaging to our students coming through the pipeline in a common language, using a common nomenclature. I think there's a real opportunity for us to do that.
What sorts of opportunities do you think that industry and cybersecurity experts can bring into the classroom? So if I wanted to approach somebody that's out in industry and say, listen, I've got a class that I'd like you to at least demonstrate something, what are the sort of somethings that industry could provide?
Well, there's always new problems to solve, and industry's job is to develop those solutions. Keeping the training current, I think, is a role that the private sector can help the public sector play. Because in my experience, the public sector tends to develop curriculums. They tend to get a little bit static. They have to go through lengthy approval processes, and in this particular problem space, they may or may not actually be sort of old news by the time they're updated. So maybe industry could play a role in that regard and have a positive impact.
Some of what they're already doing. I mean, I think bringing that expertise, becoming mentors, offering co-ops, and I think that real experience is so critical. So, and real experience comes from industry. So anything where for us, Cyber Titan started because Jamie Rees went to his daughter's school and knocked on the door and said, you guys need to start a team, and here's what the kids are going to learn, and get on it, right? Like, so, and he's industry, right? So, I mean, if all of you go to, if you have kids or neighbors or a school, like, this is, there isn't a lot that you need to do just to kickstart and be part of that. So I think starting in your community, even just yourself by, showing up at a school or talking to your kids around it, like, I think it's as simple as that. It's an organic process, and just to get it started, right? Ultimately, as things unfold, creating those pathways and informing and providing that awareness to what those opportunities are, I think industry also has a critical role to play, or and our government, but like all of those areas around that. But I think that hands-on learning, it can't be beat. That's what, even with Cyber Titan, that's what gets the parents. When the parents get to see, and the kids get home and they're like, your password can't be password. Like, you can't be an administrator and put password, and like, no, it can't be blank. And, all these things, I think just those little simple things create shifts, right? So, yeah.
There's one program which has been used in Australia called the STEM Professionals in Schools program, which is basically, it's a national volunteer program where people that are in STEM-related jobs can come into the classroom and impart their knowledge on students, but also to participate in capacity building for teachers. So this is a means to really provide that industry-relevant experience and training to teachers through train-the-trainer type exercises, and lift that capacity, which is actually really lacking, I think, not just in Australia. I think it's a global phenomenon, where you have teachers that are teaching outside of their swim lane, that don't have necessarily the most relevant, up-to-date experience. So how can we actually leverage expertise that is in industry to actually build that capacity? Well, yeah, there are models that exist. So.
Good. Maybe we can open up the floor to some of the people that are here to see if they had any questions about even Cyber Titan or some of the events that may be going on, or even care to contribute some of the activities that they may be offering to schools now. Do we have any questions from the floor?
Yeah, I just had, as you guys were talking, I was thinking about one of the skills that they would probably learn is just the teamwork itself. Like the idea that one person versus a team, they can do a lot more in a team than they can as an individual. And that seems like a highly transferable skill in whatever field they do. And the other question that I had is sort of related to teamwork, in that, do they develop leaders on the teams? Like, how do they divvy up the work in the Cyber Titans?
They get to choose, they basically get to choose to do it however they want to. So we have some teams that build expertise. So you may have some that might be Cisco experts, the other one's Windows, one's in Linux. So they switch up. Some are like routers and switch, like they figure out the domains of expertise, but the game is theirs to play as they feel. So we don't restrict how they do it, because it's a real life situation, right? So you're on a team. Some will pick leaders and scribes or whatever it may be, but it's up to them. So we've been listening to some of their strategy. It's actually fascinating how many of them are emailing us and trying to figure out stuff, and we've been like crickets. We're not saying anything. But yeah, absolutely, that's something that they can themselves figure out to do. We want to build those skill sets in them.
I think these are excellent initiatives, and they're really taking a page out of the learning sciences playbook, in my view, and you're offering experiential learning, social learning, a bunch of different learning activities that aren't normally part of the academic curriculum within the K through 12 environment. Is this stuff being captured in research or papers that are going to be maybe help extend the understanding within the K through 12 educational community, so that it could be saying, here's how you can do it? Because I don't know of any other sort of examples other than the typical science fair spelling bee type thing, where students are actually pulled out of the classroom and integrated into an active learning environment like this, except on a teacher by teacher basis. I don't know of any other systemic programs that do this. So is this being captured and maybe communicated?
So I'm not aware, it could be, I'm not aware of Cyber Patriot being captured at the high school and below level. However, generally there's a junior college or associate's degree level competition that happens in concert with the 12 and below, grades 12 and below. And I know that we actually, my company, in fact, I myself participate with one of those efforts at the junior college level, to try and not only try and develop exactly the kind of data that you're talking about, but also trying to create initiatives to bring people from traditionally more soft skill backgrounds into cybersecurity, because there's a huge, I think, opportunity for us to actually arrive at maybe better solutions in a lot of cases, and with the understanding that this is, as the last panel pointed out, this is not really a new problem. It's just a new mode of a very old problem. People have always stolen things. People have always broken into where they didn't belong. And now cyber's just a new way of doing that. So people with, maybe a higher level of education in psychology or criminology, there may be a very, very important role for them to play in this field. So.
On our end, we are building metrics in the cybersecurity stream side of things. We haven't looked at it yet from Cyber Titan perspective, but we are looking at it from within the education stream and the impact around it. And we're starting to build a whole set of metrics and a skills passport as well, so that the kids, when they graduate from it, will get a list of the skills that they've acquired that they can take with them on when they go into post-secondary or into co-ops and things like that. So we started looking at it that. By nature, the skills that they developed through Cyber Titan could then get embedded through that.
Just as a final comment in this space, what I see is cybersecurity is sort of the pointy edge of a very long sword of emerging knowledge and challenges that we're going to have, and the more lessons we could pick up here about adapting K through 12 and university education, college education to emerging knowledge, the better, because when you start thinking about what's coming down the road in the next 15 to 20 years, we're not ready for it. So this is a great testing bed for that kind of stuff, I think.
Yeah, I mean, as a national council, that's, you know, that's our whole base is forward-looking research in terms of emerging technologies and what's on one hand from a job creation and economic growth and competitiveness, but on the other is how do we ensure that we have the supply ready, and what do we start now? So, you know, there's this doom and gloom scenario on autonomous vehicles, but when you actually look at it, we just did a study on autonomous vehicles, and we're saying about 2040 before level 5 automation actually occurs. So that's like full automation. We've got a ways to go to full automation. That's not to say that there's not elements of it as we go, but we have time to prep our kids in certain areas and certain things. Some were, you know, cybersecurity, we don't have time, we need to do it now, but it's gonna get more intensified. So as we go forward, anything that we can do and anything that us as a council and all of those that can be doing to help inform on what the emerging trends are, what are the areas from virtual reality and augmented to AI to, to autonomous and smart cars and smart homes and smart cities, all these things, you know, educators cannot keep up, and so there is a job we all have and a role we all have to play to be making sure we are informing and working together with education. Not saying, hey, you're not doing your job or whatever, but saying, you know, because every educator wants to teach their students to facilitate learning. So whatever we can do to help that, I think it's going to be really critical, because there is a runway. But that runway will shorten as we go.
Okay, well, without any further questions,
One more question.
Oh, sorry?
There's one more.
Oh, one more, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Shirley McKee from the Smart Cybersecurity Network through University of Montreal. Thank you very much, panel. This has been very interesting. And I would like to pose the question, have you considered extending this type of competition to the higher grades, to the college and university? And if so, can we talk? Because we've been working on a program, and I think it would be of interest. It's been successfully run 4 times now, twice in Ottawa, once in Montreal, once in Toronto. And it's a model that is professional development as opposed to capture the flag, as many of these competitions are.
I know that our Leadership Council for Cybersecurity, Youth and Education, the question was posed to them in our last meeting with an interest. They mentioned the work that you're doing, what Algonquin is doing. York University has some programs. So we're very interested in kind of continuing the journey for students. So would love to chat around that and leverage those that have already initiated this.
Australia does have an existing tertiary level competition. It's called CySCA, Cybersecurity Challenge Australia. It's been run for the last 6 years, and it's a national competition, so students from various universities will compete once a year. Obviously that in itself to us is a little bit of an issue, because we would like them to compete more than once a year. So there's some effort underway at the moment to actually expand that challenge using that model, so that is run on a state and territory basis, so that students can actually compete and become, you know, the winners of their state or territory, and then compete in a national finals. In its current form, it is a technical challenge, so each year the theme changes. It was an IoT-based challenge last year. This year it's around cybersecurity for SMEs. And what we're looking to actually integrate into this is policy challenges as well. So you will have one stream where people are doing, the technical challenge, so cybersecurity for SMEs, and on the flip side, you have students that are, basically pitching their policy solutions to a similar problem. So that's the model that Australia is sort of starting to adopt. I'm very happy to talk to you more about that later, though.
That's great. Any further questions?
Hello, Rodney Peterson again from the U.S. On that last point, we do have a collegiate cyber defense competition that you may know about. But my question was going to be for the panel with respect to gender diversity. I couldn't help but notice as the students paraded up, there weren't many women, and it's not unique to Canada. We have the same problem in the U.S. So how do we take the incredible promise of competitions and yet not have it work against us in our effort to diversify the workforce? Any strategies, ideas, or other ways that you're overcoming the lack of girls participating?
We had 3 all-girls teams out of 92. So I'm on a mission this year. I think it's interesting. I think cybersecurity itself, it's like the programming versus coding. I don't like programming, I love coding. Girls don't like programming, they love coding. I think cybersecurity has a bad rap. I think we need the name itself and the attachment to security eliminates a lot of girls just by nature of the wording. So there's an exercise we need to do, and that's why we're starting early. And I see Heather's in the room. That's 110 girls on Thursday. We're converting. I think that's the challenge is we've got to go younger and younger, and then they can go home to their parents and explain it, and that, because I think there's a big challenge. You don't know how many times I go into a room and we're chatting with girls and I say, how many are you are interested in technology or going into technology as a career? And, a few hands come up. I said, okay, well, how many of you are thinking of becoming a doctor or physician? How many of you are thinking of going into environmental sciences? How many of you, so you're all technology workers. I hate to tell you, but by the time you get there, you're all digital workers. This is where we're headed. So time will change. We're doing a study to start changing the conversation in terms of data modeling for gender-based analysis. So even going deeper to understand what are the questions we're not asking. Why are women exiting the sector? Because we have a challenge of women leaving. We also have a challenge of girls coming in. And so what are we not asking? Tons of money is going into this, but what are we not asking? So I don't have the answer, but we're starting to create the foundation to ask the right questions, hopefully, to move it. And then personally, get your daughters involved. And it has to come from you and everybody else seeing these opportunities. I don't want to tout IBM too much, but that's Heather's mandate this year and last year, Cyber Days for Girls. And I think she's probably not alone. You probably have other organizations as well doing this, but we've jumped on that bandwagon because I think that's how to do it.
So I'm afraid I'm just going to have to cut it off there. And thank you very much, panel, for joining us today. And we'll leave Sandra, the woman with the last word there for us.
Awesome.
And that excellent question. Good. Thank you very much.